אוקיי, שלום לכולם. לי קוראים אילי פארן, אני מטפל בשיטת נוירופונקטורה או Neuropuncture. אני מטפל בקליניקה במדרשת בן גוריון ותל אביב, וזה וובינר אחד מתוך שניים שלא יהיו זהים, כך שאתם גם מוזמנים להגיע לשני ולקבל מידע חדש ונוסף. הוובינרים האלה הם כחשיפה לסדנה שתהיה בחודש מאי, בשמיני עד העשירי, סוף שבוע שלם של למידה עיונית ומעשית בשיטת נוירואקופונקטורה, נוירופונקטורה. בזום הזה אנחנו עם דוקטור מייקל קורדינו, שמפתח את השיטה הזאת, קצת על ההשכלה שלו, ואז אנחנו נעבור לאנגלית. אז דוקטור קורדינו הוא בעל תואר שני במדעי רפואת המזרח, דוקטורט בדיקור ורפואת המזרח, ודוקטורט נוסף, אני כבר קופץ לאנגלית, שזה Neuroscience, Acupuncture, אין לנו את זה בעברית בתרגום טוב. אז הוא לא רופא, אבל זאת ההכשרה שלו, הוא עבד בקליניקות רבות, להתמכרויות, לכאב, והרבה מאוד מאוד מחקרים. אז ברוכים הבאים שוב, ואנחנו מתחילים. So, hi Dr. Corodino, thank you very much for hosting and being with us this evening.
Thank you, Eli, for having me. I always have expressed this, and I want you guys to know I just have a really special place in my heart for Israel and for the Jewish community, and I'm so excited to return to Israel this year and really show you how the evolution of neuropuncture has been gaining its acceptance and its momentum throughout the world, and just the groundbreaking highlights of neuromodulation through electrical acupuncture. I think everyone's going to love it. I'm really excited. So thank you very much for having me.
So let's talk first simply, what is neuropuncture?
So I'm going to put a little slide up because there's some words we always like to be really connected to neuropuncture. So when we look at neuropuncture, we always like to explain it as neuropuncture is the only complete neuroscience acupuncture system that specifically teaches you, the practitioner, how to neuromodulate your patient's nervous system back into health using electroacupuncture. Now, neuropuncture's clinical theory was developed and is developed by a classically trained acupuncturist for the classically trained acupuncturist. And it was created by examining the research of the neurophysiological mechanisms of acupuncture, integrating that with the research of electrical acupuncture's effects on specific neural tissue, while integrating that into the holistic TCM health model, which we always love to preserve because it is not just the one kind of item we like to use in treatment. We use a variety of modalities. Some of the takeaways that our practitioners have been giving us the positive feedback is that it really develops their credibility, their language and communication skills. We're using 21st century neuroscience terminology, and I don't want anyone to get overwhelmed by that. That language is not Western language, right? When I teach in China, when I come to Israel, if I'm in Europe, or if I'm in Australia or anywhere in America, 21st century neuroscience terminology is a global language, right? So we just want to use that language so that when we communicate with our patients and other healthcare providers, they understand us, right? We're on that same understanding. And I've heard this from many scholars, and I'll talk a lot about this at the workshop, how our language, our TCM language, really should be kept to our communities. Because when we do discuss some of those pattern differentiations with doctors or patients, as we all know, it can be confusing. It could concern them when we say you have spleen sheet deficiency. They may think their kidneys are going to get diseased or something. So, there's a lot of clarity with that. And a lot of experts and scholars really try to emphasize for us not to use that language. So using 21st century neuroscience language really empowers us and gives us better tools to apply the neuropuncture system and neuroscience acupuncture.
So, Dr. Corodino, I have two questions from your explanation. First is, why is neuropuncture the only complete system And the second is, how did you get from a classical TCM practitioner to the neuroscience world?
I love that. Okay. First, how can you go from switching from one world to the other, then the complete system? Okay, let's take the complete system first. Why is neuropuncture a complete neuroscience acupuncture system? Well, first and foremost, it's a neuroscience acupuncture system. So when we are applying neuropuncture, we are doing it with the intention, with the understanding that we are communicating with the nervous system, with the peripheral and central nervous system. And when you understand that, and when you use the proper language on how to communicate with the nervous system, you realize that what doesn't the nervous system communicate with that we cannot then impact? And the answer is there's very little, if anything. We could always find a solution in neuropuncture because the nervous system really has a lot of access nodes and ways to communicate and balance it. So it's not an infertility system. It's not an orthopedic or pain management acupuncture system. It's a complete system because we can treat internal medicine conditions, mental health conditions, and orthopedic and pain management conditions. Another reason why we call it a complete neuroscience acupuncture system is it's not just isolated to the body. We have a separate and complete auricular neuropuncture system, which I can't wait to introduce in Israel. We're going to focus on specifically vagal nerve stimulation, and we have a lot of groundbreaking research and applications to clinical conditions with that. You're going to love it. But we have a full auricular system. Then we have a full and independent scalp system where we use electroacupuncture on the scalp and on the ears. Sometimes we combine scalp, ears, and body to elicit the best signature in the brain to correct the pathology. So why is it a complete system? One, we're communicating with the nervous system. And when you understand the functionality of the nervous system and how the nervous system works, then you can dive into it and communicate and adjust anything in the body. Two, again, auricular, scalp, and body systems, all electroacupuncture, all neuroscience published research supported, and they're all independent. So that's another reason we call it a complete system. Your second question was great, right? So I'm classically trained. I have a doctorate and a master's degree. That's 7.5 years of postgraduate work in classical acupuncture. And I trained in acupuncture, in China under masters of acupuncture. So a lot of the work I've always been introduced to was always very classically. Pattern differentiation, using the 8 principles, pulse and tongue. And what I've realized is this, and this is very important. When I was going through school, 2 things. When I was going through school, my undergrad is in molecular biology and philosophy. I love molecular sciences and I love philosophy. And that's really great. That's kind of what neuropuncture is. So that's a great merge I had in my undergrad. But philosophy really grabbed my attention, especially being a martial artist, studying Neigong, internal Taoist alchemy. That's all energetic work. So I loved Taoist philosophy. Taoist philosophy, for me, when you dive into the depths of it, can explain anything that we understand in the world. It's a very powerful philosophy. And you could dive into some very deep authors of those philosophical principles and books and classical texts and really dive deep into the universe. But now, the 21st century I use for Taoism is neuroscience. Neuroscience, to me, replaces what the Taoism would answer as mysteries, because neuroscience will illuminate the mysteries. And now it's grounded in science. So what I would urge, and this is what I love to do, is look at classical acupuncture and then put the lens on as a neuroscientist, because that is in essence what's happening. So then let's see how we can understand that. And we see examples of this in the Ling Shu, and I'm going to be talking about that. This comes right from classical acupuncture. So something I almost want to really differentiate is classical acupuncture and 1900s energetic acupuncture. That was an era, I would say, in acupuncture that we're growing out of. And that era was an energetic science that we know now was a little bit of a mistranslation. And it wasn't even a mistranslation. The man who translated it purposely for non-physicians. So all the doctors that translated the Ling Shu use medical terminology. So let's go back to the Ling Shu, use those lenses and look at the medical understandings of those classics. And we could. So classical TCM practitioners absolutely dive into why these acupuncture prescriptions you're learning, what's the impact on the nervous system? And that's the lens you want to start looking at. And the more you dive into the Neuropuncture Trinity, that will really give you the language and the understanding of how classical acupuncture works and how to make that transition. So the Trinity really, I think, is a really great, a tool to use to really help with that transition.
So I think this is a good time to show the Trinity.
It is,
because
Eli.
I know what it means, but
let's go. Let me put this on real quick and just. Sorry. There it is. Boom. And boom. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to go like this. Bang. Okay. So there's the Trinity. So this is the Trinity, the Neuropuncture Trinity, called the Trinity because it has three very special sections. And when we look at this, this gives your classical acupuncturist the framework, because we're not trained in neurosciences, but this gives you the framework to apply the neurosciences right here and the electrical sciences right here to your acupuncture model that you're using. If you're using the balance method, a Zhang Fu method, an auricular system, a scalp system, it's still all neuroscience. So the best that we understand these neurophysiological mechanisms, the best we're going to be able to look at an acupuncture prescription, even observe a master, and start to see exactly how what they're doing is affecting and impacting the nervous system. And then how can we harness it is the treatment principles. That teaches us how to harness those mechanisms and apply them to specific tissue that might be damaged or pathological. And the electrical techniques teaches us the electrical sciences and how to create the proper parameters to best communicate with the nervous system. And all this is research supported. So it's very exciting. We're going to dive into this in Israel, but I have a lot of this in my online platform. I don't want to bore you guys too much because this is a lot of didactic. So if I sat you down for 16 hours and just went through this, it'd be a lot of sitting down. So we're going to brush on this, and I'm going to show you how it's integrated throughout the entire workshop. But we have a lot of the deep dives into this into Neurolab, and that's really a great place where you can really study and dive deep into these.
So you mentioned a few times that everything is research supported. So can you please share with us some of the research that led you to understanding and building of the Trinity?
Absolutely. I'm just going to see if I can. Okay. All right. It's going to give you a little bit of problem. I'm just going to go like this and keep this up here for us. All right. What was that question again? I'm sorry, Eli.
If we can dive into a little bit of the research. You said everything is research supported.
Oh, yes.
So maybe we can dive into some of the research that helped you build the Trinity and realize like the work that you could and have done since then.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take, for example, the third neuropuncture neurophysiological mechanism, the endogenous opioid circuit. What is that? The endogenous opioid circuit first was one of the first mechanisms that grabbed me, right? Why? Because there's so much research on that, specifically from one Chinese doctor in China in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. He was doing groundbreaking research, and that doctor is Ji Shenghan from China. And he did groundbreaking research. I'm going to go over just a little bit about the research because it's very exciting, and it could transition right into a case study, I think. So first, his research first was acupuncture observably was noticing a pain reduction effect, right? It was able to minimize the pain experience in humans. What was causing that? So the first thing he did was use electrical acupuncture on animals and was able to show that they had a higher pain tolerance because of the EA. Then he did a sample of their blood and noticed that there were chemicals that were in the blood and in the cerebral spinal fluid that was being released by the electroacupuncture that was giving that pain tolerance. Then he further mapped out all of the endogenous opioid receptors in the nervous system by which specific frequency will activate them, where they are located in the spinal cord and the brain, and the impact they have on the body. Now, this is all research support. I'm going to give you a great example, give you a couple for the case study in a second, but a great example of just that. So what Jishin Han has proven time and time again, animals and humans, that 2 hertz, just 2 hertz millicurrent, which is basically tap, 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 tap. What would that replicate? Your regular hand lifting and thrusting. So regular hand lifting and thrusting mimics a 2 hertz millicurrent along the nervous system. And if you do that anywhere, Li4, Hagu, spleen 6, San Yin Jiao, liver 3, Tai Chong, anywhere on the peripheral nervous system, that 2 hertz is going to run along the nervous system. And 2 hertz just happens to release the enkephalins in the spinal cord, which will help drop pain. And periaqueductal gray is going to release beta endorphins. That's going to activate the periaqueductal gray. That'll also downregulate pain. So just 2 hertz lifting and thrusting for thousands of years, they were triggering those receptors and releasing that chemistry. So now we know that, and that comes directly from research. And that's very, very exciting. Want to go into a case?
Yeah, but maybe can we move the slide away just so the audience will see only us?
Yeah, I'm trying to find that slide. I have a lot of things. I think we're going to have to do this for now. I'm sorry.
Okay. So yeah, let's dive into a case study.
Okay. So we have how about Parkinson's? Okay. So we have a really nice prescription for Parkinson's, and that Parkinson's prescription includes one section of it, gallbladder 34 and liver 3. And gallbladder 34 and liver 3 at 4 hertz. That's what we use. And what would 4 hertz look like? 4 hertz is now a little bit faster lifting and thrusting, right? That's 4 hertz, okay? Something that could easily have been done by humans for many, many, many years. Now, for Parkinson's, what is the presentation of a Parkinson's patient? Well, they're going to probably have a tremor, right? They may shake a little bit when they walk, right? And in Chinese medicine, that's going to be viewed as diagnostically as wind, right? Potentially liver wind, right? And what we would do to maybe quell that wind would be to needle and stimulate gallbladder 34 and liver 3. I think those are classical points for Parkinson's. Research now shows us that when we are needling and e-stemming those 2 nodes at 4 hertz millicurrent, that actually triggers a release of tyrosine hydroxynase in the brain that breaks down dopamine, feeds the basal ganglia, and will stop the tremor. And we have videos of this. I'll be demonstrating this and showing this in Israel, but it's very, very exciting. So there's case studies that we have and prescriptions that come from research that we see mimic classical acupuncture. And that's why I always say neuropuncture is not changing acupuncture. What we're doing is we're bringing the acupuncture whole system into the light of neuroscience.
And is there any other research done by neuropuncture, like the whole community of neuropuncture?
So we have our doctorate program right now, and there has been several graduates that have completed their work in there right now, and that's been on Parkinson's. Actually, I'll be showing some of that work actually in Israel. Major depressive disorder, I'll be showing that also in Israel. We're now working on PTSD with some very advanced prescriptions that I'm going to teach you. I can't wait in October, so you'll be bringing that back to Israel as well. And then we're also doing insomnia, chemotherapeutic induced insomnia, neuropathies, and post-traumatic amnesia, so a form of memory loss. I think that's going to be applicable, as you can imagine, to a lot of different cases. So a lot of really great research being done. All of the prescriptions in neuropuncture are bits and pieces coming from research, maybe the dosage, maybe the prescription, maybe the physiology or the pathophysiology of the condition. It's all rooted in science.
Okay, and I think the example you gave about the endogenous opioid circuit, maybe we should dive into another another mechanism or give another example of internal medicine. I'm saying
Sure.
that just because in Israel, most of the time at school, you study and you learn about using electro machines only for pain. So
Oh,
I would like to present and show, because I know in my clinic I treat all kinds of stuff. I know you do as well for many
absolutely.
years. So I just want to break this stigma that electro with acupuncture here it's equal to pain management.
Okay. First of all, yes, absolutely. And look what I just found.
Awesome.
Sorry about that. All right. Okay. So, yes, first of all, let's look at a nice internal medicine prescription and again, all coming from research, and that is insomnia. Wonderful. Okay. Just like we saw in Parkinson's, right? Classical acupuncture points that could be part of a pattern differentiation prescription, gallbladder 4, liver 3, at the proper stimulation, releases tyrosine hydrogenase that helps with dopamine production, which will help quell that tremor and the basal ganglia misfiring of those dopamine pathways. So that's wonderful. What about insomnia? So, insomnia, let's talk about two beautiful nodes that we could easily look at that you would see being prescribed in classical acupuncture as well. One of them would be heart 7, very commonly used, right? We do a lateral insertion of heart 7 just because we do like to get that ulnar nerve. You'll learn in the neuropuncture workshop, we do not puncture the nerve. We're just pressing it right up against it. I'll show you how to do that. But that heart 7 actually has a very unique impact on the brain in the area of sleep. So heart 7, as we know, is I think it nourishes heart blood. It's good for sleep disorders and it's good for calming. Well, we actually know that heart 7 at 2 hertz millicurrent will help target the 5-HTP receptor of the hypothalamus and the melatonin system and the melatonin receptor. So that is really nice. And we see that very importantly being used in insomnia. Serotonin, if you're not familiar with this, gets released in the afternoon. In the morning, dopamine gets released. So we get engaged in the world. And as dopamine dives down, serotonin starts to come up to make us feel better, but also at night to calm us down and get us ready to go to sleep. And then obviously melatonin, GABA, and those other receptors and those other neurochemicals help us initiate that sleep circuit. So we have heart 7 that actually gets into the melatonin receptors and serotonin system. And then we also have another famous acupuncture point, Amiens. And Amiens is found just on the base of the occipita, right? Right in between Sanjiao 17 and gallbladder 20, right on that little protuberance a little bit. We like to needle off it and thread that down just off the bone. Very important. We'll talk about that in Israel, why we needle like that. But Amiens at 4 hertz has this beautiful effect of activating this area of the brainstem called the CNTS, the cortical nucleus tractus solitaris. We'll talk about that as well, because there's several ways of actually getting a signature in there. Now you're starting to see how we can use body and auricular and scalp points to get multiple directions of electrical circuits into a specific area of the brain. And Amiens goes where? Right to the CNTS and activates the GABA receptors and benzodiazepine receptors at 4 hertz millicurrent. So that's 2 great nodes that we wind up using with other ones in the neuropuncture prescription. But you could see the research supports melatonin, serotonin, and GABA, and the brainstem, autonomic center for the reticular activating system that initiates for sleep. So beautiful research that supports those nodes having that impact on the central nervous system for insomnia, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, it is a lot of fun. So yeah, to sum it up just in simple words, maybe, so we have different points that different frequencies will give us a different effect or enhance the effect of the classical acupuncture, or completely just maybe not correlate exactly for what the Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine taught us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So we can look at now some of the traditional functions of the acupuncture nodes and then correlate them to some of the maybe physiological effects they actually have. Then we might be able to translate what they were observing and what they were trying to explain. I think that's very important because there is a lot of, I think, confusion with classical acupuncture translations and I think how the system even works. And I'm looking forward to going back and really reinvestigating that in the link show. But when we look at classical acupuncture point functions, there will be some similarity, and you can use electrical acupuncture to sometimes exactly enhance those. And you don't do it blindly, though. Everything we do is from research. You could, if you want, just put 2 hertz on a point because it'll be like lifting and thrusting. That's not going to hurt anything, right? But you'll see there's other specific frequencies we use to target specific areas of the brain or receptors. And another good example of a point that has a lot of research behind it, but the point name actually makes sense with the research, is gallbladder 37, which is Guangming, which is bright eye. And how is that point on the lateral side of the calf named bright eye? Why is that? And it actually has been shown to be very effective in helping to, open the eyes and help clear vision and help with ophthalmological type of conditions. And what it actually does is when you needle that and ease them at 2 hertz, lifting and thrusting, the actual visual cortex increases its metabolic function and its rate. So we see activation of the visual cortex when we're needling gallbladder 37. And that's basically how I view acupuncture and the human nervous system now. How can we do these peripheral nerve stimulations, communicate with it properly, never make the patient uncomfortable, but then restore balance? And it's definitely not just for pain. No way. Great for mental health for so many reasons, like we're going to go into in Israel, with the ability to really stimulate and almost like massage the cortical structures, which is very, very important for mental health and internal medicine. So a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. And I have to add, we have a correlation with the electro biotech as well, that we're sort of competing with them in this area. Like the tibial, you want to
So we'll go
explain
over
some more?
that, some of those in the workshop. But yes, in short, what I've been doing for a long time, a lot of practitioners or someone will ask me, have you heard of this acupuncturist work? I don't look at acupuncturist work anymore. What we're doing now in neuropuncture, the only thing I look at is neuromodulation. What's Silicon Valley in California? What biotech Neuralink stuff what are they doing with electricity to communicate with the nervous system? Then how can we maybe mimic that with electroacupuncture? And that's neuropuncture. Understand the nervous system and then how to, normalize it through electroacupuncture.
Okay, so we'll get into it more on the workshop.
Definitely.
Definitely. Do we have anything else on the agenda, or we should talk about the workshop?
I think that's good. Yeah, I think we could talk about the workshop. It's going to be a 3-day event. Very, very excited. And because I haven't been in Israel in some time, and since we've evolved so much, it's important that I take it from the beginning. So we're going to go a little bit into the history, right? Let's really understand what was going on at the world at that time when acupuncture was being developed. And then we look at the history. So we're going to go into the history, and then we're going to go into right in the beginning. We're going to go right into the auricular system and the scalp system. First day, the Trinity, auricular, and scalp. And then the second day is going to be all orthopedics. And then the third day is going to be internal medicine and mental health. It's going to be a 3-day completely spectacular workshop on neuroscience, acupuncture, and electroacupuncture. And I think anyone that practices acupuncture is absolutely going to love this. I'm telling you, just the feedback that we've been getting from around the world. We now have a school that we've opened in Liverpool, England, in the UK, instructors around the world. This is really, really catching on. And I don't want any of us in our profession to fall behind or have Western medicine. When I say Western medicine, I mean, practices and disciplines that really seem to be trying to take our medicine from us. I know in America that kind of is happening with certain practices and disciplines, and it shouldn't happen. And they're doing it because they say we just move energy. We work on the nervous system. No, they don't. And that's a mistranslation. So we have to correct that. And I'm telling you, you guys are going to love it. I'm so excited to come here and bring it to you. I'm like an open book. I love sharing my knowledge. And I really think you're going to really gain a lot from it.
Yeah, definitely. I can speak for myself and from my own experience. So if any of the listeners want to talk about it more, you're welcome to give me a call. I would like to add, after the workshop, you get an access for 10 days of Neurolab. And Neurolab is a video library of Dr. Corandino and other instructors that has over 200 hours of recorded lessons. And you have tons of content by diseases, mechanisms. You can dive into the Trinity deeper. And what else, Dr. Steve, would you say about it?
I've been reshooting the system since 2022. So I reshot the auricular system. There's a 3-part scalp system on cortical structures, subcortical structures, signatures and circuits, 2-part pain medicine module, redid neurodegenerative diseases, cardiology, sleep medicine. There's women's health in there. There's cadaver videos, case submission forms, lots of case studies that you can look at. That's a video that goes through the Trinity and goes through the prescription that you could replicate right in your office. And most importantly, you get direct access to me as well. That's right. I don't really tend to answer too many emails if you're not training with me, because I don't know what level you're at. And I think it's really reckless just to do that. But if you're training with me, what I always say, I don't want to give you the fish. I want to teach you how to fish. So I'm going to teach you the tools on how to create your prescriptions and how to think and use that lens properly to really modulate your patient's nervous system.
Awesome. Is there any questions from the audience? If there is, please type
questions? Us. I don't see any questions right now.
Okay. אם מישהו רוצה לכתוב, זה הזמן. I was just telling them in Hebrew. Can you put on the last slide? And I think then we'll
that sounds great.
We'll close this event.
Well,
yeah, go ahead. No, you go.
I just want to thank everyone again. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, there's going to be a lot of great little clinical pearls at the workshop. We're going to be going over the auricular, scalp system, body system, Trinity, mental health, internal medicine, pain orthopedics, a lot of electroacupuncture. You're really going to enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this little snippet of what we were discussing. Next week, we're going to do this again. So please come join us. Next week, we're going to talk about clinical depression. We have a great prescription we want to share with you, nice and easy. Got some great case studies and some research. And maybe for next week, if you want, you can email Eli or myself questions that you would like us to answer for you. Maybe it's about the workshop. Maybe it's about the profession of acupuncture. Maybe it's about a prescription or about neuropuncture. Whatever it is, we welcome the questions and hope to help you out with some information. And for more information about the May Neuropuncture Workshop, you can contact Eli, and there's his number right down there. Why don't you say something?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Corradino. And yeah, I'll switch to Hebrew if it's fine by you, just for this end part. אז תודה רבה לכם שהקשבתם והשתתפתם, ותודה שוב לדוקטור קורדינו. אני אזכיר רק שהסדנה היא מה-8 עד ה-10 למאי, זה סוף שבוע, חמישי, שישי, שבת. למשתתפי הסדנה תהיה גם כיתת אומן לאחר הסדנה. יש מחיר של הרשמה מוקדמת שהוא עד שבוע הבא, ואחד הדברים החשובים שאולי שכחתי להגיד, שהסדנה מתקיימת בשיתוף עם מכללת ארזים, עם המסלול של לימודי המשך. זה המספר שלי על המסך. אם מישהו רוצה להירשם לסדנה, לשאול עוד שאלות, ממש מוזמנים ליצור קשר. אז תודה לכם. And again, thank you, Dr. Corradino. And everybody have a nice evening.
We do have a question that just came up about, are we going to talk about stroke and anything at the workshop? So first response is yes. We're going to be going over the scalp system. And there is some intricate things that you're going to learn that definitely will benefit patients that have had strokes and damage to their brain. Stroke treatment, though, in neuropuncture, that's a weekend course. There's a lot we need to learn about that. But you'll definitely learn some really great snippets on how to start to address that. And I could probably just give you a couple clinical pearls while I'm there. But the whole workshop, we're not going to cover stroke on that because that is a really long process of scalp, body, rehabilitation, exercises, physical therapy, very important. All the acupuncture I've studied, from masters for scalp for stroke. They might not say it a lot, but you got to listen. And they'll say it's almost, if not more important, to do the Chinese physiotherapy. You have to move the body. So there's a lot involved in stroke rehabilitation. It's not just a one-day event or a quarter of a day of class. But in the scalp part that we're going to talk about, you'll be able to apply a lot of those techniques to those cases. Okay. You got it, Gil. Thank you. Looking forward to meeting you. Okay, we're good.
Okay, we're good. Thank you, everybody.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.